am so excited to be here. My name is Saron. This is my first time at Config, and I have some awesome things to share with you today. As Jason and Cassidy mentioned, I am the founder of BCM Club. I'm also a developer, and what we do at BCM is a membership platform for people with multiple streams of income. And today I'm excited to talk to you about design as the ultimate developer tool. So I remember the first time I learned how to design. This was back at Montgomery Blair High School many years ago, back in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I was a junior. And back then, I worked on our high school newspaper called Silver Chips. Now, this was a hardcore after-school activity. It wasn't even after school, it was during lunchtime. We spent our lunch breaks scouring the hallways, looking for interesting stories and interesting people, and we took this newspaper extremely seriously. And I was a features reporter, but I wasn't just a features reporter. I was also on the design team. And on that team, it was our job to create these beautiful graphics to really lay out the spread of the physical printed version of the newspaper to make sure that it was enticing enough that people actually picked it up and read it. Now, one of the first stories I laid out was about fashion on campus. And one of my first assignments was to take a cutout of a runway model and put her on a long runway. Now, I needed to do that, and I needed to get rid of the background behind her, but I didn't know how to do that in Photoshop. This was my first design assignment, and unfortunately for me, I had missed the Photoshop crash course that taught you how to do this very easily, and I didn't know about the magic lasso tool that would have literally just let you cut out anything you want and then remove the background. It was pretty straightforward. And for some reason, I didn't think to just ask someone what the best way of doing that was. So I used the knowledge that I already had, and I did this. I made shapes and covered the background in these little, I was 16, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was very excited, I was very proud of myself, and I made these little shapes and I covered the background to create the illusion of transparency. And the funny thing is, it actually worked really well and it looked really good. And then I felt like an absolute genius. And it wasn't until near the end of this assignment, our editor-in-chief walks by and he, is asking how things are going, and I proudly share my little shapes with him, and he furrowed his brows. And he's like, why don't you just select it and delete the background? And I go, what do you mean? And he said, like this. And in like 2 clicks, he did what took me an hour to create, a beautiful, clean cutout of a runway model. I felt like an absolute idiot. At 16, this was my first lesson in how important it was to learn your tools, to really take the time to understand them, to take advantage of all the features and all the things that it can do. I never wanted to feel like an idiot again. It's been a long time since those computer lab days, since I first learned Photoshop, since I first learned my first piece of design software, but I never forgot the lesson of understanding the power of your tools. And as developers, we're really good at tools. In fact, I would say that sometimes we are a little too good. We spend precious time and resources on these new and exciting dev tools when we don't really need to. We spend hours playing these new dev tools when we really should be focused on building our products instead. We love learning, and the newer, the more technical, the more filled with buzzwords our tools are, the more excited we are to dig in and play. We learn these tools, we debate these tools, we write, speak, and demo these tools. We strengthen our technical know-how and make our coding world just a little bit bigger. But for some reason, as open as we are to learning new software and new developer tools, we've decided that design is out of scope. We've decided that it doesn't belong in our toolkit, that the tools that are fun to play with and really enjoy are squarely developer tools. They involve consoles and terminals and code. Design is not for us. Design is for designers. Today, I want to challenge that belief. And I want to suggest that in our effort to learn new tools, we go beyond Tech Twitter's latest technical trends and venture into the world of visuals. And I want to add design to our toolkit. And in doing so, we can supercharge our development process, we can save tons of time, and we can focus on building the right thing. I'm a developer who does a lot of design stuff. I've never been hired as a professional designer, but I've had to do design as part of my workflow. As part of being a solo developer, as part of being a founder, I've made my fair share of UIs and mockups and landing pages and websites, and my design is currently being used by millions of people all over the world. I got into tech over a decade ago, back when the lean startup movement was fresh and revolutionary. The lean startup methodology shares that the biggest mistake you can make as a startup founder, as someone building something new for the first time, is to make something that no one wanted. But it's really hard to know what people want before you actually build it, before they have an opportunity to play with it, feel it out for themselves, see the product and see how it works. You hope and you want to build the right thing, but you end up getting pulled into coding before you've gathered enough information. You create these powerful features on these beautifully designed screens before knowing if people actually want it. We build first and ask questions later. Now, if building only took a few hours, if it was just a short sprint here or there, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, and we could build, iterate, learn, make mistakes, and it would be perfectly fine. But oftentimes, a working product takes time. Even a simple MVP, as long as we put it in front of users, can take months to build. And this is where the danger comes in. Because in building right away, we risk spending months on something only to find out that nobody cares. That what we built wasn't what the user wanted, it's not something they would pay for, it doesn't solve their problem. This is the ultimate startup sin. What if instead we added design to our toolkit? We use design to test and to validate and to vet our big ideas, to see if anyone cares before we invest the time in building something real. What would that look like? How would that work? Now, in the early days of a startup, we focus on the big picture, and that is a very simple question. Do people even care about this idea at all? Am I solving a real problem? For that, I use my basic design skills to create landing pages that test out my concepts, like this one. This is a landing page for one of our products called Disco Link. It's a link in bio that helps you sell products and services if you have different streams of income. Now, I first came up with this idea after starting a project called BCM, which is coaching, community, and content for people with multiple streams of income. Now, I knew when I started this idea that I wanted to help folks who are doing multiple things. People oftentimes have a day job, but they might also run a newsletter or have a YouTube channel or have written a book or sell courses. They do multiple things and can't be contained to one title. So I wanted to create something for this community. But first, I needed to understand their problems and really get to know what they needed in hopes of building something for them. Then one day, on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, about a month after launching the BCM community, I was driving down the highway with my daughter in the back seat. We're on our way to the Children's Museum. And it's on these long rides that I really do my best thinking and ideas start to really flow. I was going through all of the user interviews that I had done in my head, and I was turning over all the information, putting together pieces of info, and the problem really became clear. All these people who were launching these different disconnected revenue streams, and they were spread out across the internet, launching one-off pages when they were ready to launch, and then they would kind of disappear into the ether. And what was really interesting is that if I loved what they did and loved their work and wanted to support them, there was no easy way of seeing all the activities that they did, all the work they produced, and there was no easy way of paying them. What they needed was an online storefront where they could put out all of their products and services all in one place. Now, I knew that building a storefront like this was going to be quite the lift. After all, there are many different ways that people can make money, many different revenue streams to account for, and my product would have to handle all of them. One of those revenue streams was paid consultations. And as far as a feature set, this was basically recreating Calendly, kind of a big deal. Now, I love this idea, and like most developers, I just wanted to start building. I wanted to open up the code editor and code my little heart out. But I resisted the temptation. I was strong. I knew the pain of wasting time, of building something that no one cared about and that no one wanted. And I was determined to get feedback first. So how do we do that? Most startup advice will tell you, talk to users. There's a famous book, The Mom Test, that's all about talking to users, and it tells you to really understand the user's pain points, to understand their problems, to really get to know them deeply, and then see if your solution matches the problems that they talk about. This is great advice and a helpful first step, but what do you do after that? What do you do after you're done talking to users, you've synthesized these interviews, you've picked your solution, you have an idea that you think might work, might be the right fit? Where do you go from there if not directly building? What's next? This is where I use a simple tool that has helped me invalidate dozens of ideas and helped me validate different feature sets over the years, preventing me from making expensive and time-consuming mistakes. What's next is building that landing page. Now, we're not going to actually build it, we're going to design it. We're going to keep it all in Figma, and we're not actually going to launch it for the sake of this exercise. Designing is a powerful tool for learning and validation, and I really want to break down why. First, let's define what a landing page actually is. There are many different versions. I'm sure you've seen them and signed up for a bunch. This is not the simple landing page where you have the form field for your email and you're building a wait list. Our landing page is going to be a little bit more robust than that, and it's going to contain two components. The first is partial mockups of the different features. This gives the user a good idea of what the product is and how it works. And the second is the copy, and this helps explain what the feature is, the value it gives to the user, and what the features are all about. So let's dig into the partial mockups first. When we think through the major part of your features, this helps us do so without having to consider every single state, size, and screen. It allows you to really focus on what matters most without worrying about every single permutation, every single version of the feature in your head. And if you're building a product, you need to account for every single version, but on the landing page, you do not. All you need is a few screenshots of major parts of the product, just enough to get the users excited. And you can get away with partial screenshots as well, just snippets of different parts of the product and how it works. This helps you narrow your scope and really focus on what is most important. Next, let's talk about copy. So I love copy. I think writing copy is a powerful exercise for everyone on the team, including developers. Having to explain what and why your product works and what the features are is a great opportunity to think about your product from the perspective of your user, highlighting what would matter to them. The problem of the user becomes top of mind as you write out how the product addresses it. You're forced to ignore the implementation, what's fun and what might be interesting to build kind of goes to the background, and you're forced to focus on what matters. This is an exercise in becoming your user through your writing, through your copy, and helps you keep that North Star in sight. And it prevents you from getting distracted by shiny new tools that might pop up as you build and as you ideate. Using this landing page is a key part of the customer development process because it allows you to get feedback quickly without committing to building anything. It's just a landing page. It's just a description of what you might build in the future. There are no big decisions. You haven't made any big promises. There are no big commitments. You can always change your mind. Asking your user to react to this landing page is also really important because it makes the conversation a lot easier. They're not worried about your feelings. They're not worried about ripping apart months of work that you've put into this. They're not worried about someone's hard work and someone's feelings. They can give you their honest opinion. You're giving them permission to critique freely. Having a landing page also allows you to change features and product direction very quickly. If the user interview revealed that the import feature you thought was really important actually no one cared about, that's okay because you haven't built it yet. There's no downside. You can literally just delete that feature and replace it in minutes, not months. Now, one big aspect that we don't talk about when we talk about building products, I think, is our own emotions. It's surprising how emotionally caught up we can be in the features that we build and in the product that we put together. By checking our assumptions with a landing page, we can spare our own feelings. It's just a mock-up, there's no big commitment, it's not a passion project that we spent months on, we're not emotionally invested in the outcome. It allows us to preserve our emotional runway for later on in the development cycle when it will matter even more. The beauty of designing a landing page is that you can quickly play with feature sets, get feedback and updates until you hone in on the right combination of features for your product. And then when you build, you're not building with guarantees. Everything is still a risk and a question that you have to figure out, but you're building with a lot more confidence. So you've got your feature set, you've got some validation, and you might feel like you're ready to build. But I want you to resist that urge just a little bit longer. And instead, I want you to reach for your design tools one more time. Instead of building, I encourage you to go ahead and create a full mock-up. The problem with going from your feature set in your head to actually building it straight with your code is that there are all these little decisions along the way. All these decisions that impact your sprint and impact your timeline. If you make the wrong decision along the way, you'll end up ripping out code that you spent weeks on and having to build and then rebuild again. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So this is the mock-up to a feature for paid consultations. After doing user interviews, I knew that my users wanted to be able to charge for these consultations that they were doing. Now, I knew that this feature needed to allow users to pick a date, to make a payment, and to fill out a form. But the question is, should it be a multi-step form with all these sections and little breakpoints and maybe some animations along the way, or should it be a single long form? Should the form be a pop-up overlay on top of an existing landing page, or should it be a dedicated page all on its own? Should the page have other information, like the consultation pricing, maybe some testimonials or some other data, or should it be just a clean, dedicated page with nothing but the form on it? Now, the interesting thing about these questions is that they do not change the feature. The feature is still paid consultations. It's still taking money in return for time. That has not changed. But what does change is the way that I build and what the user experiences. All those little decisions are important key decisions I need to make in order to decide what to build. When I ask my developer friends, my indie hackers or solo devs or individual founders or people on small tech teams, what they do in this situation when they have an idea like this, they tell me that they just start building. They know what the feature is supposed to be in their heads. They have a vague idea of how it should look, and now they're ready to start coding. And when they do, one of two things happens. The first is that they build it, they show it to users, and the user comes back and tells them it's not what they want. In the user interview, it gets revealed that it's not how they work, it's not the right flow, or doesn't solve the problem the right way. Now, they're in a position where they have to go back, figure out where the holes are, redo their work, and hopefully make the user happy. But the second thing that happens, I think, is far more interesting. See, what happens is that when the developer sees the feature go live, they see the buttons they can push, the form they can fill out, the data they can submit, they look at it and they go, oh crap, I don't like how this feature works. It doesn't make sense to me. I put the button over here, but really it should have gone over there. I tried to create this clean, streamlined experience, but now it's missing all this context, and now I feel like I don't really know where I am on the page. I thought that having the form fields be on one page was a good idea, but man, is that a long form. I really wish I could break it up. It's really hard to trust the designs in our heads. It's not until we see it laid out in front of us, laid out in Figma or whatever software you'd like to use, that things start to click and different holes become obvious and parts seem to clear up. Before I build anything, I try to spend some time in a mock-up. This is where I can really see my ideas without spending precious time building something and thinking about how I should build it. This is where I make the connection between the feature and the screen. By taking it out of my head and laying it out on a screen, I'm forced to confront my assumptions and my ideas head on. It gives me the chance to find the holes and see if the feature as I imagined it, as it sounded and looked in my head, if it actually makes sense. Because if I look at it and it doesn't make sense to me as a mock-up, it's not going to make sense when I build it, and it's not going to make sense to my user. Designing a simple mockup can save you hours of building and rebuilding. It's a powerful way to save time, to increase your efficiency, and to build with confidence. The only person who needs to see your mockup in order for it to be useful is you. But to get that sweet, helpful feedback from users, I encourage you to take it one step further and to turn it into a clickable prototype. This is where the power of designing in Figma comes in, and you get to really breathe life into your ideas in just a few clicks. You can use their gorgeous blue arrows to connect one screen to another, building powerful animations to increase fidelity. This is a very powerful way to fill the gap between static design and working app. It's just enough to help the user feel like it's real and believe it and take it seriously, and it helps them bridge the gap in their imagination. You can give the user a realistic enough experience to get helpful feedback on how the feature should work, without needing to build out the real thing. And again, it's just a prototype. It's not the real thing. Users have full permission to rip it apart, to give you their honest feedback without having to worry about your feelings and your opinions. Prototypes are also help focus on the most important thing, which is the user experience. Building off of the design in our heads is really difficult because it's easy to get caught up in the implementation. What library should I use? What APIs are there? How will this work? Oh, can you go back one slide? I think you're going forward. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Yes, so these are all important questions to ask when it comes to implementation, but they are not the most important questions at this stage in your process. What's more important is what the user thinks of this feature and how this works for them. This stage, it's about nailing the user experience that should be top priority. Prototypes give you the opportunity to do just that. You're free from thinking about implementation details of how to build the actual app. And once you show your users the prototype and you get that validation, then you can switch gears to figuring out how to build it. So let's talk about switching gears. Building a product takes a lot. Sometimes you get to be on a team and you get to outsource some of that work. You might have a dedicated designer or UX researcher, but if you are on your own or you have a very small team, you're working on a side project, maybe it's a new business idea, a lot of times building is more than just the code. Building involves understanding the problem, knowing the user, and creating an experience, and then, finally, implementation. There's lots to do and tons of little and big decisions to make. But if you take a moment before building and work on a little bit of design, something amazing happens. You get to breathe. Instead of holding all of that information in your heads, having to make design and feature and implementation decisions all at once in your brains, you get to just focus on one piece at a time. It all starts with what problem you're solving. Before we get into building, let's focus on that. We'll use our new design tool, the landing page. We'll talk to users, we'll validate our idea, check. Next, let's focus on the primary features of our product and really think those through and have a good understanding of what they should be. We'll use our new design tool, the mockup. We'll review our features, we'll find the holes, we'll make the changes, check. And finally, we get to focus on how the features will actually work, how the product comes together. We'll use our final design tool, the clickable prototype. We'll talk to users, validate the flows, and then finally, we can start to build, doing so with confidence, saving time, money, and development cycles on something that is vetted and validated. I know that Figma can feel very intimidating to a lot of people, especially developers. It's a powerful piece of software. There's lots of things you can do. But if you haven't already, I encourage you to take an hour to do a couple tutorials and see how far you can get. I think you'll be surprised at how much you can do in a very short amount of time. I did this with my developer friend. She is also a founder, also a solo dev, and she loved to build. She went from idea straight to production all the time. And in doing so, she was spending so much time redoing her work, ripping out features, starting over again, putting a button here, realizing it didn't really work, having to redo her work. It was painful, and it wasted a ton of time. So one day, I convinced her to let me show her Figma. And within an hour, she was making mockups and moving buttons around with no code involved at all. I didn't know if this was going to stick, if she would keep up with this making mockups and using design as her dev tool, but a week later she texted me and told me how much she loved using Figma and using it to make all these mockups, and it sped up her process significantly. She was saving all this time in testing out her ideas and theories in mockups first and making it into clickable prototypes before she dedicated the time to build it. She was able to take a moment to think, and that's what I want for more developers. I want you to take a moment. Building is exciting, but coding tools should not be the only tools in our toolkit. We can save time and a ton of heartache if we incorporate some design into our development process. With design, we can take a beat and breathe. Thank you.